So these are strange times. I don't even think I need to start this talk off saying that. I mean, just right now, what I'm doing, I feel like I'm in 2001: A Space Odyssey. I'm looking into a little lens. It's like a tiny version of Hal. It's like Hal Jr. or something that I'm looking into. And, you know, it's just, it's strange. In some ways, my life hasn't changed too much because I'm just following the same routine that I followed before. The only difference is I'm not going someplace. But I know for other people, their lives have been disrupted a little bit more than that. I know people who have loved ones, for example, who are in care centers and they can't go visit them anymore. My husband and I can't visit my husband's parents. So we stand outside the house and we well, actually we've met them in the driveway. The last time that we visited, it was kind of a funny thing because I wanted, for my in-laws' safety, I wanted to keep some distance, but my mother-in-law kept walking toward me and I felt like I was being chased all over the driveway. So these are strange times. And like I said, for some people, this has been somewhat disruptive. I do know when this was all beginning, I had several friends who expressed the fact that they were really concerned about being lonely. And it really hit me pretty hard. And I'll tell you right now that what I wanted to do at that moment for my friends who can't see their parents the way that they used to see them, and for those who were afraid of loneliness, I really wanted to make it so that they would no longer suffer. It just was my initial instinct. And it really had nothing to do with the Bodhisattva vows. It's just, there was somebody that I cared for and they were upset. They were really worried about how things were going to unfold. And so I wanted to make that suffering go away. But I know I can't do that. So I didn't think there was anything I could do to make suffering go away. I can't do it, and these teachings can't make suffering go away either. You know, the Buddha taught, I teach but two things, dukkha and release from dukkha. And we know dukkha is that strange little word, literally translates into suffering. But that translation doesn't quite capture what it is that dukkha is pointing to. Dukkha is that sense of unrest, that sense of dis-ease that's deep in our heart. And Buddha says he teaches us those two things, dukkha and release from dukkha, can show up as suffering. And we hear that release from dukkha, and we might hear in that a promise that there will be no more suffering. This reminds us of the story of the 84th problem, which is a story that I know I have told quite often at Dharma Field, so I don't know how much I need to go into it. But just as a quick reminder, there was a gentleman who was suffering in his life and had been told that the Buddha was a great teacher. And so he went to the Buddha to see if the Buddha could help ease his suffering. And he met the Buddha and he told him about all of the problems he was having, and it went on and on and on and on. I kind of imagined it was a little bit like the episode of Seinfeld when George Costanza went to see a psychiatrist and he was telling him all of the problems of his life, and it just kind of went on and he made the psychiatrist depressed, actually. And so this guy went and talked to the Buddha and was telling him all of these problems that he had. And when he was done, the Buddha just finally said, I can't help you with those problems. And the guy was incredulous. He just said, what do you mean? You're a great teacher. I came here so that you could help me with these problems. What good are you? And the Buddha said, well, I can't help you with those problems. I can't get rid of your problems for you, but I can help you. And here's where the 84th problem comes in, I guess. He said that we all have 83 problems. And we know this is true in our life. I don't know if it's 83, but we do know that in our life, we have things that seem to just come up that we have to deal with, that maybe we think of as being problems because, well, they're problems. And when we take care of one, it seems like another one comes up. So we always have 83 problems. And Buddha told the gentleman, you always have 83 problems, but I can help you with your 84th problem. And like I said, 84th problem, what is that? And the Buddha said, you don't want to have any problems. So we can help with that problem that we don't want to have any problems. But even when we hear this, when we hear a teaching that what Buddha is going to do is help us to not want to have any more problems, we might want to hear then that, oh, I'm not supposed to have any more problems. And we might see again problems as suffering. I'm not supposed to suffer. or we're, let's see, not supposed to not want to suffer, to make it even more complicated. So we might sense that when we're feeling something, that an emotion we might associate with suffering, like feeling trepidation or feeling angry or feeling sad or feeling frustrated, we might think to ourselves that, well, first of all, I'm not supposed to be feeling this way. It's the way we tend to think of feelings that we think of as negative. But then we also may think, well, and I'm not also supposed to not want to feel, we can get ourselves caught into this kind of cycle. And it sounds to us then a little bit like what Buddhism is pointing out, what the Buddhist teaching is that we're not supposed to feel at all, because we're supposed to not want, I don't know, it gets very complicated. But really, when we look at what the teachings are pointing to, ultimately, when we see what it is our practice is, we see that what our practice really is, it isn't any of that stuff. It's not about wanting something to be or not want to be. It's simply about being what is that is showing up. It is being what is. Joko Beck, in her book Everyday Zen, pointed out, she said, our practice, our aspiration, is to be this moment and let it be what it is. If you are afraid, just be fear. And right there, you are fearless. I really like that teaching. So she says again, our practice or aspiration is to be this moment and let it be what it is. And that can be really difficult for us, to just be this moment, to let it be what it is. Even sometimes when we are letting it be what it is, we're often not quite doing that. We might tell ourselves something like, oh, I have to let this be. I have to let this be what it is. We might be experiencing some strong emotion and then think that we might articulate to ourselves, I'm grasping something right now, or I'm trying to be aversive with something. I need to let this be. I need to let go. And there we are, not just letting it be what it is. It's hard for us to let this moment just be what it is, especially again, if the feeling is something like fear. When fear is showing up, and I know it shows up for me, I get this feeling in my body and it's unpleasant, right? If I'm gonna rank it in a scale of I like it, I love it, to I hate it, it's gonna be more along the I hate it and I kind of resist it. I don't want it to be there. So this isn't necessarily something that is easy for us. And yet it's a very simple practice if you really see what she's saying. If you're afraid, just be fear. And right there, and this is what I really liked about her teaching, right there, you are fearless. No longer do you have fear. If you are just fear, you don't have fear. You are fearless. And then we want to ask ourselves, okay, that sounds fine and dandy, but how do I do that? How do we do that? How can we be fear? Because that sounds like a pretty tall order. And again, you look at the situation we're in right now. If you read the news or listen to the news, it might be hard for you not to feel fear, some kind of panic. Maybe there's some circumstances in your life. I know a lot of people right now who are being laid off in their jobs. Job stability is not there for everyone at this moment. Ask yourself if it really is ever there in the way that we think it is. So how do we just be with the feelings? How do we be the feelings that are arising at that moment? And our practice is simply just to step forward into this. I'm getting that phrase from someplace, and I'll come to that in a second. We just step forward into this, whatever this is. And it's a simple practice. And that's not to say that it's an easy practice. Because like I said, if stepping forward into this is something that's painful, it's hard for us to see how we can step forward into that. Of course, stepping forward into this can be easy. I'm not saying it's difficult either. Just imagine that it's joyful. I think like many of you right now, I've been going on walks every day. Now I'll say I've been going on walks every day since about November. when two things happened to me. I did something with my back and I couldn't go to the gym to work out. So I thought, well, if I can't go to the gym to work out, I'm going to go for walks. And then my car, I don't want to say it broke down, but my car mechanic said this. He said, your car is unsafe to drive, and the repairs that it needs cost more than this car is actually worth. So I didn't have a car for a while, and so I needed to not only walk, but I needed to go. I was taking buses to places I was going, and I'd had to walk to bus stops. So I was walking every day. But I'm saying this just because now, back then when I was walking, I hardly ever saw anybody, but now I see people all the time, and it's really quite a joy to see. I see my neighbors and we greet each other, of course, from a safe distance. We're social distancing, but we wave to one another, we say hello to one another. But on some days, the other day, for example, it was overcast, and I think there'd been a forecast that was going to rain out. I didn't see anybody. I saw 0 people walking. So with this choice that we might get soaked with rain, not so easy to step forward into this. But when the day is sunny, I don't know if you've experienced this, but then you see all kinds of people out. So it's easy for us to step forward into this when this is joyful, and we see that this is radiant, that this is something, again, we associate on that scale of I love it, so I hate it. It's on the I love it scale. It's easy for us to step forward into that. Becomes a little, I don't know what, when we think of it as being mundane, when we step forward into the mundane. Sometimes we resist that. I know I've read some comments from people that staying in the house is driving them crazy because they just don't have anything to do. And that's sort of stepping forward into the mundane. And again, you see how we want to tinker with that, how we want to do something. And that's not to say don't take up a puzzle. A friend of mine just discovered putting together puzzles. That doesn't mean don't take up a puzzle, but just look at what's taking place right there when you have that sense of frustration. I used to live in an efficiency apartment in Minneapolis. This is many years ago. And I remember, you know, at efficiency, it was basically all one room, except for the kitchen and the bathroom. They were separate. And there would be points where I was just like, I got to get out of here. And luckily there was this was back before coffee shops were real common, but in the Twin Cities, there was a coffee shop that everybody used to go to, and it was just on the street. So I treated that as my living room away from my living room. But we can actually sit there and be with that. I don't like this is too boring. We can be that feeling right there and not have to do anything about it. Just be that feeling of frustration. Step forward into this, and this is that sense of the mundane, that sense of irritation we might have with it. That could be what this is. This is just this. I can't really describe what this is. And this act of just stepping forward into this, into being this is Zazen. This is another one of those tricky words, Zazen. Because Zazen, it has some different dimensions to it, the meaning of that word. Literally, it means sitting meditation. Za is sitting, Zen is meditation. But it actually, when you encounter in the teachings, we see that it actually means more than just sitting meditation. It's actually this practice of stepping forward into this. It is being this. It's not trying to withdraw from this. And in fact, when you're doing Zazen, it's very hard for you to withdraw from this without noticing that that's what you're trying to do. So when we do sitting meditation, the Zazen, that's the formal sitting practice. As many of you know who take this practice up, there's really not a lot to do except be this. You can drift off into your dreams, and maybe you can do it pretty effectively. I think I'm a pretty good daydreamer. You can get to the point where you're so lost in a daydream, so it seems that you don't even notice the wall that's in front of you as we sit meditating facing the wall. And it's a wall, and it's 3 feet away from you. It's as if you're not even seeing it. So we know we can get lost in dream, but in that sitting meditation, in that formal practice, it's real easy for us to see that that's taking place. And we can, in doing that, we've just returned to this. We're seeing what's actually taking place. We're seeing that we're caught up in these fantasies. We're seeing the wall before us again. And that is actually our practice, is just seeing what's taking place, being what's taking place. So Zazen really is not limited to sitting on the cushion. When we talk about Zazen, this is how you take up every moment of your life. Everything you do, everything you say, everything that you sense, this is going forward. This is being what is. So it's not being separate from any action that you make. It's being fully that action. You think about that, that's complete freedom, and it's complete responsibility for everything you do and everything you say. But it's just taking a step forward, step by step. That's how we do this. This is actually how we live our life. We think that we can maybe put our life on hold when things are going rough. Actually, we probably don't think we can do that, but we might desire it. We might say, I really want this world to stop right now. And yet, there it is. You have to take another step forward, take another step forward. There's a passage about this that I find really rich from Shunryu Suzuki's Not Always So, and I want to read to you that passage. I'm actually going to break it up into two parts. And Shunryu Suzuki talks about that Zazen as step by step. He says, you can do true Zazen practice here, watching yourself step by step, one step after another. We practice like a cow rather than a horse. Instead of galloping about, we walk slowly like a cow or an elephant. If you can walk slowly without any idea of gain, then you are already a good Zen student. So I'm just going to stop right there, give it a pause, and take a look at what it is that Suzuki's pointing out to us. He says you can do true Zazen practice here, and I would say not only can you do it here, it's the only place you can do true Zazen practice. True Zazen practice is here. And where is here? Right here, where you are. You can do it here, watching yourself step by step, one step after another. And again, that's just how we move through our life. Even as we're sitting here, we're taking one step forward. In this next moment, one step forward. In the next moment, again, another step. And I like the fact that he gets then, we practice like a cow. And it's an animal that maybe we don't think of as an animal we might identify with, an animal that we don't think of as being graceful. And cows are kind of lumbering animals. If you've ever seen a cow run, if you've ever seen a cow run and it's running toward you, you know that they actually can move pretty fast. But we don't think of a cow as being sort of graceful. We don't have the same kind of romanticism to a cow that we do a horse. Now I'm saying we don't. Maybe you do. I don't know. I'm not saying that, that you don't maybe romanticize cows. But for the most part, there's something humble about that cow. And we think of cows too as pretty steady. Right? So they're these animals, they're just going forward. They walk slowly. They're not galloping. He also gives the image of an elephant. We see the elephant solidly grounded, slowly moving, maybe that trunk going back and forth. And it's just that step by step, as he says, we walk slowly without any idea of gain. So without any idea of that sense of, I want the suffering to stop, I want it to go away, I want enlightenment, whatever it is that we might initially take this practice up for, we don't look at that as we move forward. We're just stepping step by step. You do that, Suzuki tells us you're already a good Zen student. He goes on, he says, we do not practice Zazen to attain enlightenment, but rather to express our true nature. Even your thinking is an expression of your true nature when you are practicing Zazen. Your thinking is like someone talking in the backyard or across the street. You may wonder what they are talking about, but that someone is not a particular person. That someone is our true nature. The true nature within us is always talking about Buddhism. Whatever we do is an expression of Buddha nature. So as he said, we do not practice Zazen to attain enlightenment. Rather, it's to express our true nature. But again, we don't do this to express our true nature. We're not doing this practice saying, okay, now I'm expressing my true nature. Now I'm expressing my true nature. And some of us think that that true nature just means that we can do whatever it is that we want to do. That's my true nature. Okay, I am Steve, and this is the kind of thing that Steve does. I'm expressing my true nature. That's sort of like a young woman that I saw once in an elevator when I was in graduate school. And it was a full elevator, and everybody was doing what you do with elevator etiquette. You face the front. And the other thing with elevator etiquette is you don't say anything. You just kind of stand there. Maybe if you know somebody, you know, you talk about the meeting that's coming up, or you say, hey, how you doing? I mean, there are little casual conversations, but for the most part in an elevator, perhaps because it's such an intimate space, the etiquette is you stand facing forward. And this young woman came in, and her hair was blue, and she had a Batman t-shirt on, back when this was maybe a little less common to see somebody in a Batman t-shirt. And she had, her belt was a seatbelt buckle. It was belt. And then she had a lunchbox that I don't know what it was, you know, some kind of kiddie show from the 60s lunchbox. And I looked at her and I went, she's going to make some kind of comment about us not talking. I know she's going to do that. And she's going to imply that there's a freer way for us to be. And sure enough, she did. No sooner she got in the elevator, the doors closed. She goes, well, look at you people all standing around not talking anything, like zombies, you know? So when we're talking about being our true nature, it's not that. It's not some idea we have about ourselves. It's really just that stepping forward into this. It's being this. This is our true nature. In the Fukan Zazengi, Dogen tells us, Fukan Zazengi is the universal recommendations for sitting meditation. Dogen points out that going forward, this moving forward, he goes, it's a matter of everydayness. Before I talk a little bit about what Dogen's pointing out there, I want to talk about that word everydayness. I was going to give a class at Dharma Field. Unfortunately, it was under enrolled, so we put the class on hold. Maybe I'll teach it in a future time. But I wanted to think about that term everydayness. Because we have ideas about what every day is. And every day is, well, you know, if you look it up in the dictionary, it just means daily. Every day is something that happens daily. We might then ascribe to it a kind of emotion, or if not an emotion, a lack of emotion. Everydayness, that's just blah, right? That's mundane. We might check it off as being boring. It's just something that we see every day. It's the reason why we go on vacations, because we get tired of that everydayness. We want something special in our life. We want something different. We want some kind of adventure. We don't want the everyday. But everydayness isn't that idea we have of everydayness. Everydayness is going forward. Going forward is a matter of everydayness, but everydayness is just this right now. So it may seem to us in these times that our everydayness has been upended, but everydayness is what's taking place right now. Everydayness is right now, because even though the trappings might have changed somewhat, and those trappings not only are in the location you might be, but they might also be the things that you had taken for granted might not be there any longer. That's still here now reality unfolding, showing up that way. It's still every day is really just reality unfolding. But there's something about this everydayness, when it starts to look like it does now, we might think that we're not strong enough to step forward into this. We might think that we need to be prepared in some way, or maybe even if it's not a time like this, when we imagine a time like this. So again, people I knew who heard about the stay-at-home order that was coming got very worried about what was coming up, and I understand that. I'm very, even coming to this talk this morning, I don't know what's going to happen. All the past week, I shouldn't say all the past week, I moved off of a computer, but my computer was kicking me off the internet frequently. And so one of my panics was, what if I'm in the middle of this talk and I get kicked off the internet? It could happen again. Because the last time I was at a meeting at Dharma Field, the power went out at my house, right? So these things can show up, and I am a person who tends to, panic's maybe not the right word, but I think about it and I kind of get a little bit of energy from thinking about what might happen. And it's either energy that can be me being prepared, or it can be energy that really makes me feel, and then I assign a negative sign to it. But that is still everydayness. That is still reality showing up. And we might not think that we're strong enough to do that, but just think every moment of your life, excuse me, you actually are stepping forward. We actually are just taking life step by step, even if we're trying to outthink reality. But we might think that we need to, in some way, I don't know, be better prepared for what life is going to be throwing at us, when it's not, again, our idea of what everydayness is. And what I'm talking about here, again, is not like special knowledge or skills you might have to be able to do something. You're going to go scuba diving. If that's your plan, you're going to need to know how to do that. So you do need to prepare for that. And I'm not talking about something you might need. I don't know, the example I think of is ingredients to have a meal. In order to take care of something, you're going to paint your house, you have to prepare for it. But it's more the sense of being able to be equipped to handle what life throws at us, that we can put ourselves in a different place so that we can handle what life is throwing at us. And we can already see in that attitude the fact that we're not really stepping forward into now, is we're tending to see whatever is showing up as something that's in our way, perhaps, that's an obstacle or something that's being thrown at us. And then we think that there's a state of mind, and we might think of it as enlightenment. We might think of it as a calm state of mind that we want. And so that's perhaps why we practice Zazen, is so that we are calm and so that we can handle what it is that's showing up. But if you look at what's going on there, what we're already thinking of, what we're already talking about, is we want what is showing up to be other than what it is. You know, so we might be thinking in our minds that I'm not ready for this. And we can just be there and see that that is just what's showing up right now, is that sense that that's what's going on. We can see that what we're planning for, what we're looking for in that future, is something that perhaps we don't want it to be that way. So we're trying to think about how can we arrange conditions such that I can handle that. So again, I think about people I talked to before the stay-at-home order was given. And people were concerned. They expressed concerns to me, and I got concerned for them. And then, believe it or not, the people, I've been talking to them ever since we've had this order, and things have sorted out for them. And the people who thought they were going to be lonely actually figured out, just live their life by a routine, and there are ways that you can stay in touch with other people. You can reach out, for example, to somebody you think might be lonely. I know somebody at Dharma Field was just needed to talk to people and thought about people who maybe they hadn't seen in a while, they wanted to talk to. So the people who were concerned a few weeks ago, it's actually, in talking with them in that time, I've come to discover that they've realized it wasn't quite as bad as they thought it was going to be there. You just step forward, you just take this as it shows up. And that practice of not needing to have some kind of condition where you're, I don't know, bulletproof, or you're made out of Teflon, where you don't have any problems. Even if they're problems, they're not problems. That seeing that I don't know, isn't necessary, that's realizing that our ordinary life is actually what it is that we're stepping forward into, this everydayness, that we don't need something special. And I wanted to, it called to mind actually a koan. So I want to share with you a koan that is Nansen's Ordinary Mind is the Way. And again, this, I hope this will help us to see a little bit about how going forward is a matter of everydayness rather than some special skill that we need to have in order to be able to face this, but that this instead is just everydayness. We don't need something special. Something special actually is an idea that we have, and we can wake up to the fact that we have that. But in this teaching, Nansen teaches ordinary mind is the way. So Joshu, who is Nansen's student, asked Nansen, what is the way? Ordinary mind is the way, Nansen replied. Shall I try to seek after it? Joshu asked. If you try for it, you will become separated from it, responded Nansen. How can I know the way unless I try for it? Persisted Joshu. Nansen said, the way is not a matter of knowing or not knowing. Excuse me. Knowing is delusion. Not knowing is confusion. When you have really reached the true way beyond doubt, you will find it as vast and boundless as all of space. How can it be talked about on the level of right and wrong? With these words, Joshu came to a sudden realization. So again, you have Joshu. Just really quickly tell you who these two people are. They're very well-known figures in Buddhist teachings, and you've probably heard, Norm has told many stories about both of these teachers. Joshu, the student in this case, was really a kind of a prodigy. He woke up when he was 18, so he had his awakening experience at 18, but then he continued studying with this teacher for 40 more years. I know I pointed this out in another talk, but I want to talk about that going forward. So he was awakened at 18, and really that just means he sees what's going on here. And that doesn't mean then that we've had a touchdown and we're over. Instead, we keep this practice up step by step. And so Joshu continued studying with his teacher for 40 years until his teacher passed away. And then after his teacher passed away, he traveled around visiting other masters to deepen his practice. He just kept working at that practice. At the age of 60, for 20 more years he did that. In a day and age where you don't just drive around in a car or hop on a bus, where travel was a little more arduous. And he traveled around from center to center in China, monastery to monastery, studying until he was 80. And then he taught for 40 more years. So that's Joshu, that's the student here. And his teacher was Nansen, who was one of the great teachers of his time. He was a student of Baso and taught many other great masters. So that's who we have in this koan. And we have Joshu then, asking his teacher, what is the way? What is this practice? And Nansen replies, ordinary mind is the way. And I actually think that this is hard for us to see, that just what it is that's showing up, this is the way. That our way is to realize this. It's always this, that you can't get away from. We tend to think that what it is we're doing in this practice, or perhaps what it is we should be doing in our life, is something other than that. So we get kind of thrown off. It just doesn't make sense. Ordinary mind is the way, then what are we doing in this practice? And that's a good question. What is it we're doing in this practice? And so that prompts Joshu to ask Nansen then, after Nansen says, ordinary mind is the way, Joshu says, shall I try to seek after it? Think about that. Ordinary mind, how do you seek after that? Ordinary mind is just this ordinary everydayness. You can already see that where is there to go? Right here is everydayness. Again, no matter what is showing up, this is reality unfolding this way. It does this now and now, now, now. So what does it mean for him to go seek after it? And Nansen responds, well, if you try for it, if you try to have ordinary mind, if you try just to be everydayness, then you're separated from it. You can see that because you're already not seeing that this is enlightenment right here. You're already not seeing that. And you're thinking, okay, well, I need ordinary mind. My problem is that I don't have ordinary mind. It's right here. We know that ordinary mind is just this showing up. So whenever we think in terms of what Nansen does. Well, should I chase after it? Should I seek after it, I guess he said. Then you're separated from what's showing up. And Joshu persists. He doesn't let this go. He goes, well, how do I know the way unless I try for it? And that's an interesting question. So how is he to know enlightenment? How is he to live this life unless he tries for it? And Nansen points out that the way is not a matter of knowing or not knowing. And he's talking about this conventional way we have of knowing or not knowing. I'm intellectually understanding, because we actually do know the way. We actually are enlightenment. We do know this. We experience this directly. What happens is, whatever it is that appears before us, we get caught up in that. And that becomes, to us, ultimate reality. That has some kind of solidity to it. That's what we ascribe to it. So we want to know then, well, what is this ordinary mind? How do I do it? What is it? How do I get that? How do I know that? And we're thinking again about this intellectual understanding. But Nansen says the way is not a matter of knowing or not knowing. Knowing is delusion. So you get a teaching like this, and provisionally you can say something like, well, I know what they're talking about. And I would invite you, if you do that, by the way, with the teachings, either with something you're reading or something you're hearing where you say, yeah, I already know that. If you're there, just pay attention to that. Notice that that's what's showing up. Because that kind of knowing that you intellectually got a grasp on it, you know what it is it's talking about, that's delusion. That's not to say that we don't have some kind of understanding, perhaps of these teachings or something. But we really have to watch it when we say we know something. What is it that is actually showing up there? And we buy into this idea that we have intellectual understandings of things, that we know things. And that's delusion. Not knowing, Nansen points out, is confusion. So when we think, well, I don't know ordinary mind, so I better go try to find it. That's confusion, because right now what we're doing is we're seeing ordinary mind, or if I can translate it into another term, a way we don't think of it, enlightenment is somehow separate from this right now. So we're confused. We're not seeing that this everydayness is enlightenment, is totality, fully expressing as this. Nansen goes on, when you have really reached the true way beyond doubt, you'll find it as vast and boundless as all of space. There are no boundaries to it. When you've finally reached the true way beyond doubt, again, it makes it sound like it's someplace we have to go to, but it really, it's just here. So when you finally see that without doubt, and once you see what it is that's actually taking place, there is no doubt. This doubt shows up when you believe. That's when you don't see something. That's like the story of the, person who has a jewel in their hand and says, or doesn't. They just have a clenched fist and they say, I have a jewel in my hand. And then you either believe that that person does, or you don't. Maybe you doubt. You go, I don't know if they have a jewel in their hand or not. And that's, of course, that kind of belief. That's how something like 3-card Monte works, if you've ever seen anybody doing that. And they play on that sense of belief. And I didn't know how 3-card Monte worked when I saw that happening on the streets of New York. And I almost put down all the money that I had. At that time, I was visiting a friend. I almost put it all down because I was like watching this game and I could always tell where whatever it was that they were looking for, the Queen of Hearts or whatever the card was. I could tell where the card was and everybody around me was getting it wrong. And I was going, well, this is way easier than it looks. It's right under there. It's right there's the card. They were just waiting for me to put my money down and do that. And then I would have that moment of doubt. Oh no, did I pick the right card? We're not talking about that. So when you've really reached the true way beyond doubt, that's when you just see what's actually taking place. That's when you live this, and you'll find that this doesn't have the kinds of limits that we normally ascribe our experiences having. There are limits to it, but we don't see them as being, again, the ultimate reality that's showing up. And once you see that, Nansen points out, how can it be talked about on the level of right or wrong, or good and bad, or great and I hate it, that kind of thing. And with that, Joshu came to a sudden realization. And we can realize that too. Again, it's just a matter of stepping forward. And as I said, this isn't always necessarily easy. We may want to face situations that are coming up bravely. I know for me, I always think of myself, I identify with the protagonist of the Woody Allen movie, Love and Death. I don't know if any of you saw that. The character's name is Boris Grushenko. And he was asked by a friend once if his refusal to join the Russian army to defend against Napoleon was a call for passive resistance. And Boris responded, no, I'm suggesting active fleeing. And that's kind of the way that I think I tend to see myself. But we do want to see ourselves as facing the situation bravely, thinking again that we need to, I don't know, be of a steel tempered will or strength or something to be able to go into this. So I wanted to share with you one last thing here. I actually wrote a much longer talk than I intended to, so there are many things I wanted to share. But I really like this Joko Beck teaching, again, from Everyday Zen. And she helps clarify this, again, this sense that we have of thinking, I don't know, just thinking about, like, perhaps we might not put it in these terms about the right way to face everydayness when everydayness seems to be a challenge. And in this particular instance, she's talking about dying. Joko Beck says, in this enlightenment state, the state of a person who to a great degree can embrace any or all conditions, good or bad, I'm not talking about a saint. I'm talking about that state, often preceded by an enormous struggle, when it's okay. For instance, we often wonder how we will die. The key is not to learn to die bravely, but to learn not to need to die bravely. So again, she's pointing out that, this stepping into everydayness, this just being with what's showing up, we might have ideas about what kind of person can actually do that. Again, like I said, I'm more like Boris Grushenko. I'm just saying, openly cowardly at times, right? But we might think there's a particular person who can do this. A saint, someone who's holy, somebody who's better than we are. And she says, I'm not talking about that state. She's talking about a state instead when it's okay. And she tells us that this is often preceded by an enormous struggle, because it is difficult for us, like I said, for us to just be what is showing up. We want to tinker around with it. If it's difficult, we want to make it so it's not. If it's mundane, we might not want to step forward into it either. It's difficult for us. We struggle. And sometimes that struggle can be very profound, a very profound struggle. And I think what led me to take up Zen practice, there was some struggling going on there. There were some real serious emotional struggles that I was going through. But it can also be less significant than that. Just to help you to see again how it is that that sense of being okay can often, that sense of stepping forward into this, just stepping forward into this can often be preceded by struggle. Think about something as simple as being caught out in a rainstorm. So the way it tends to work for me is right at the beginning, I'm trying to think about how to avoid getting wet. So I'm looking around, seeing if there's something I can stand under, or maybe I can pull something up over my head, or if I have something I can hold in my hands, like, well, am I okay with this getting wet and not my head get? So you're kind of plotting this out. But if you're really in the middle of that rain, then there's nothing you can do about it. At first you're bracing and you're struggling with it. And then at some point you're okay. You're just that rain. You're just getting wet in the rain. So there's that sense of letting go without even telling yourself, I have to let this go. I have to let go of my struggle. There you are in it. And there's nothing that can be done about it. There's nothing that can be done except just be this. So that struggle that we have, we might be with that for a while and see that that struggle's going on. At some point, that struggle will just loosen its grip on us. We will, she says, just be okay. And it sounds like I want to be okay with that, but it really is just being okay. It's just being this. It's not fighting that anymore. We can let go of, well, she says, we wonder how we're going to die. The key is not to learn to die bravely. So we might think somebody who takes up this practice, when they face death, they're going to face it a particular way. Again, these are ideas we have. Instead, stepping forward is to learn that we don't need to die that way, that we don't have to, that's not the goal. The goal is just, again, to step forward into this and to be this. And it seems to me that right now, again, as things kind of seem topsy-turvy, just remember that we do at every moment we're stepping forward. So it's just to realize, what are we doing now as we step forward? And to be that, not to futz around with it. That we don't have to feed things. So if we're feeling fear, that doesn't mean to go ahead and start narrating stories to ourselves that might fuel that fear. But it's just to feel what that is. How does that show up? And that's not even to dismantle the fear. That's just to be with it. Again, for me, I know how it shows up in my body. I see how it shows up. I can see what it is I'm thinking of. And I can just be with that. And I can be with that. What's showing up? And it's going to be different from moment to moment. And that's this matter of everydayness. This is everydayness. This stepping forward is a matter of everydayness. We don't have to do anything special. We don't have to be in some special state. We're not going somewhere special. We're right here. Just step forward into this. So, like I said, I actually planned way too much to talk about here. So I'm going to let my talk end there. If people have any questions or comments, I welcome them at this time.
Oh, okay, Steve. Sorry, I couldn't find the mute button, but I get this thing about stepping forward, but sometimes, and you touched on this in your talk, but sometimes it just seems like I'm just not strong enough to do that.
Well, again, that's what Steve points out. That's where you have the opportunity just to, that feeling that you have, that you feel like you're not strong enough, that's it. That's what you're stepping forward into. That's what you can just be with, rather than to even want to not feel that way anymore, right? That's the step forward. So rather than, we might think of that fear coming from, there's some kind of narrative, there's something that's going on there that perhaps is causing that sense that you're not strong enough to step forward. You're stepping forward, even in that feeling. So, it's just be there with that, realize that that's what's going on. So that's the reality. I don't know if that helps at all.
Well,
I mean, it's not going to get rid of that feeling of, I don't think I'm strong enough for that, but that's the feeling that's showing up right now. So rather than feel the need to not have that feeling, just be with that feeling right now. Okay. You're with it as you go forward, step by step. Like I said, a lot of people I know who had misgivings and were really quite concerned about how things were going to move forward. They've just moved forward. It's just that. And it included that discomfort that they had. So, yeah, thanks for asking. Well, okay, thank you very much.